So everyone, as we're waiting for other folks to trail in, I just gotta say, it is an amazing, amazing, amazing honor to be able to host these CavanKerry Press readings, especially because as the marketing communications director, I get to work so closely with each one of our authors as the book is being produced and thinking of ways that we could boost the signal for their work and highlight their work and help them share the work with the community like what we're doing now. Within 2 minutes, there's 60 people on this call, which is very, very exciting. And what I like to do, I like to use the chat box for these readings. So at the bottom, if you're on a desktop or a laptop, you'll see a little chat screen. You could press on the chat screen and type a message in the chat box throughout the evening. What I like using these for during the reading is if you hear a beautiful line or something that's inspirational, or if something really just made you feel something, you can write that in the chat. In between the reading or when the author has been done reading, they could check back and they could share that positivity and you could share that positivity. So that's really nice. We'll also be having a Q&A at the end of the reading. So all the questions, you could direct them towards the chat box, and then myself or one of the other CavanKerry Press representatives will put it on our queue and try to get all our questions through. You'll notice also, if you're in the chat, Gabriel Cleveland, which is our managing editor, basically does everything for this press. He's amazing. And throughout the night, he's going to be giving you different codes, the coupon codes for the books for both Rise Wildly and The Snow's Wife. The coupon will work simultaneously for both. So you can either use the coupon code friendsrise or snowfriend in order to get your 20% off coupon when purchasing. So these 20% coupon codes don't last forever. So please buy these while they are on pre-order. So with that being said, I think now is a good time to start. Welcome everyone. Since I'm in gallery view, if I could just get away from everyone for a welcome. It's so nice to see everyone in here, to feel all that positivity. We have Frannie Lindsay today, our first time publishing with us, author of the Snow's Wife, which is a great, great read, and I can't wait to hear from that. We also have Tina Kelley today. Tina Kelley is published her second book with us. Her first book, A Bloom in a Rye, her second book, Rise Wildly. These are two powerhouse ladies in publishing and in the community, and they've just done so much. So it's an honor to have them here. So the run of the show tonight, we're going to start with Tina Kelley. I'll give her a brief introduction. She'll read and speak for about 15 minutes. Then we'll do the same thing with Franny. After that, we'll have a Q&A. The Q&A should last maybe until about 8 o'clock. If it pushes a little more, that's totally fine. Let's just be cognizant. Tina Kelley is a very, very busy writer. She actually has another Zoom at 8 o'clock, so she will be leaving at 8. So if we have any questions that we could direct towards either both Tina and Franny or Tina, let's try to get that first, just so we could have everyone share their time. And as always, if you have something nice to say, or if you have a great thought, or you felt something through one of the readings, please put it in the chat box on the right. And as a friendly reminder, please just make sure you stay muted for the reading, just so we don't disturb the listeners as well as disturb our authors. So without further ado, let me read the bio of Tina Kelley. Tina Kelley's earlier books include A Bloom in a Rye, CavanKerry Press, 2017. Ardor, which won the Jakar Press 2007 chapbook competition. Precise, Word Poetry 2013. And The Gospel of Galore, Word Poetry 2002, winner of the 2003 Washington State Book Award. She co-authored Almost Home, Helping Kids Move from Homelessness to Hope, and reported for the New York Times for a decade, sharing in a staff Pulitzer for 9/11 coverage. Her writing has appeared in Poetry East, Southwest Review, Prairie Schooner, and the Best American Poetry 2009. She and her husband have 2 children and live in Maplewood, New Jersey. So without further ado, here is Tina Kelley.
Thank you, everyone. It's so exciting to have so many people on and so many familiar faces. I am, as always, honored to be part of the CavanKerry community. The books that they create are incredibly beautiful, and I just like to hold them and sort of pet them because they have this velour feel to the covers. So I'm gonna just jump into the poetry and start with the kind of title poem of Rise Wildly. It's called Trains Running After Storms, which is a headline from the New York Times, July 20th, 1997. I had to commit flight. I had seen too many birds escaping, flying off to the sides as if I were evil. In the east, the rumbling call to me, kept ahead of me, vanished. I rose and laughed. Be confident, the other trains told me. Rise wildly. I saw a star that appeared only for a second, then another star, then another, short, fast stars, all far more complex than we had imagined. The sky, the flat land, the fields. There is so much more of everything, like daybreak in a house you knew first at night. In one car, everyone had the same name, all the Yolanda Schmidts on the planet at once. I saw meteors all day behind the sunlight. Yolanda, age 9, wanted to know what never mind really means. The fields near Spokane look like lily pads, green circles of irrigation systems. The last train followed the last engine, like the flung back infant. We were magnificent. We're in the castle of the angels, the 5-year-old Yolanda hollered. You know the look of the small plane flying beneath the big plane, that sliding lack of control. Perhaps this is a forever nightstand, the 37-year-old Yolanda thought, pondering what had happened very early this morning. Have you ever seen a bee land on a bud and both fall fast to the ground? When we land, there's a tunnel in the moon. Thank you. And I am going to search for the word Kate because I want to talk about my daughter who drove in a caravan of 7 college students in 3 different cars from Lake Tahoe to Seattle yesterday, 13 hours, aging me horrifically, going through the fires. And, you know, I wasn't quite sure how that was all going to go. Luckily, it went okay. But it's one of those things what to expect when you're expecting and just beginning to sign up for parenthood. They don't tell you what they put you through. I'm very grateful to her for surviving. And I think she might actually be on today. Hi. This is called Please Bring a Moon. Kate loves the moon. I carry her. She throws her head back and tilts up her chin to watch. I see its reflection in her perfect new eyes. She holds her hand up in greeting. This reminds me how the moon's its own cocoon, how hard it is to explain, how the world would manage perfectly fine without it and its changes, its hiding in clouds, its 2-week disappearances, awfully long when you're a year old. I used to count each new crescent as a step closer to her birth. I used to know where end of the moon lane is. I once saw 2 owls flying across a field on a full moon, and a few minutes later, a feather floating down from the sky. I caught it. I will tell her, but will she tell her child? What would a baby moon be called? Moonlit, moonling, and how would it hatch? Will she watch it from the back seat, a constant with trees passing through like thread? Thank you. And I just searched for Drew and I did not find him by name, although I know he's in this book. And I should do equal time, so I'll have to find the Drew poems later. Don't tell him, Kate. This one is called The Menopause Doula. And Susan and Martha were, I think, sitting with us at the last night of AWP, and somehow this conversation topic happened, and I wrote it down, and I said I have to write a poem about the menopause doula. So thank you, guys. Are your mother and aunts gone? Friends facing their own symptoms, irritability, empty nest, fatigue. Men don't get it, kids don't care. Perhaps I can meet your critical needs. I will describe the 34 symptoms of the change, the best being the end of menstruation, the rest completely dreary. Who would sign up for depression, loss of libido, irregular odor, night sweats? But truly, almost all are lessened by regular exercise. I will show you the benefits of running early in the day. It dusts the heart, polishes it with nourishing lemon oil. Follow my advice and I can nominate you for cover girl of my Menopause magazine. I can tell tales of women who outsmart, start anew, and thrive. My services include commissioning a fine, sincere neighbor man to mention that you look hot, foot rubs on demand, they give the same boost as a 30-minute nap, a 10-page list of things you don't have to care about any longer, what fruit your body is shaped like, what colors match your complexion, most flattering makeup routines, and who's on the cover of any magazine. As one last introductory bonus, a few fun facts. Climacteric is a synonym for menopause and means critical period or turning point. In fruit, it marks the peak of edible ripeness. You're better at trivia, having lived through more of it. Universally, humans grow happier after age 51. I can provide cool, damp cloths for the sudden 105-degree fever that mugs you, a booklet of easy, new, nourishing, tasty recipes, a lavender bath to erase the stale sweat, sleep masks, earplugs, melatonin, hand cream, a partner in crying. I'll whisper to you slowly over time that invisibility has privileges at airport security, at restrooms in diners where you're not a paying customer, but no one cares. And yes, in the mirror, the once cranky mirror. Thank you. I would like to read To Live the Imperative. And this has a epigraph from Steve Stuart Smith, who wrote a book called Darwin, God, and the Meaning of Life. And we found him because I had found this in Psychology Today, but they didn't answer their requests for permission to use the quote. So we actually, I think Gabe found the actual author of the quote, and he was very nice and said we could use it. The epigraph is, for all we know, though, ours may be the only planet in the universe hosting mind and consciousness. If so, then our decisions and our conduct will determine whether the universe has a long future as a conscious entity or will soon lapse back into unconsciousness. Isn't that a cheery thought? To live, the imperative. There is a German verb to separate souls from bodies. How terrifying, the world without the two bright lights in our kind, live eyes. Instead, a radiant glacier melts to black stone. Maybe the universe reads all our email, understands our jokes and work, and loves our steel drums. 99% of all the species that ever lived are now extinct. We counter with side curtain airbags, programs to maintain brain health, surefire weight loss diets. A language dies every 14 days. We bash ourselves upstream, scraping flesh to find a mate. Could you live in a world without fish? What if fireflies stop blinking? What does the sperm feel when it wins? I praise the headlong from love to egg and life. 40% of all humans ever died in their first year. Each age loses sleep over air raids, 1984, Russia, Cuba, nuclear winter, climate change, 2012, North Korea. The person I loved most in the world went to solitude. He lives outside my tenses. By now you have felt this too. This is what a hovering helicopter does to me. There are stars so far away, their first light has not reached us yet. We must remain the only ones to know and praise them. That's one of the very late poems. Actually, it's the last poem in the book. I want to read the first one, which we debated about, but I think I love a lot. And it's a little cheerier than the last one. It's called I Wish You Had Known When You Launched Me. How I loved my home pond, its aerated, bleachy smell, the beach leaves around it, the skating, picnics, scout ceremonies, my kids visiting now, how I would feel at home in the sky, climbing high hills, seeing bluegrass like tails of galloping horses slowed down, like cirrus clouds sped up. I wish you could know I buckled up every single time, fell for a Moreau painting called The Diamond Smiles at Twilight, never walked into a bar alone. Could you guess I'd marry the kind of man who shared, who gave great advice on what car to buy? Did you have any idea I'd have a kid who'd say, do you think I shouldn't like you as much as I do, being a teenager and all? I hope you could hope that yes, I was meticulously raised, that a friend would call me serene, that I got so old my scars faded, and I learned of 100,000 undersea mountains, only 1,000 of them named. Did the smallest thought of yours guess how very much I would love it here? And then for my last one, I'd like to read, I'm a little morbid, I'm a little cheerful, but I'm also a little morbid. And this is a true story, as are many of my poems. It's called I'm Having the Death I'd Always Hoped For. And it's in gratitude for Gus Lindquist, 86, an artist in town. His voice from intensive care sounded chipper, very much his. Hey, I'm pulling the plug today. I inhaled, asked if he wanted a visit. I had to get my son from school first. Gus would try to last that long. At the hospital, I found him comfortable, curious, fascinated, unafraid of earplug silence, darkness, focused on creativity, diversity, love. He wanted the young doctor's company. Hold on a second, my computer's stuck. Told her after a few calls and emails on his to-do list to please stop dialysis. It would take a day. He wouldn't suffer. I stayed an hour, kissed Gus goodbye. The cheek was cold. Walking down the hall, I didn't crumble, off to my son's soccer game somehow. By next morning, his heart slowed to done. I couldn't say rest in peace. In an ancient ritual, he knew one shines light on the other's head, heart, and hands. Rest in light. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Tina, thank you so much for that. Taking a second to ingest those words.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. I always love hearing you read. It was wild to read with you a couple of years ago in Newark. It was really nice. So I still remember that reading. Thanks. You had that genius idea of doing like a marathon reading where one person would kind of like go up after another person, but there was no set order. That we had to just be inspired by the other poem. What was that? A flow reading? A flow reading, right?
Flow reading, yes.
Yeah,
it was not my original idea, but it's so fun and it keeps you listening.
It does. It does. So great. And so speaking of listening, we're going to turn it over to Franny Lindsay now. Her book is set to release in the beginning of October, so and Tina's will be set to release in November. As a reminder, this is the pre-launch, so you can save 20% now. Gabriel Cleveland, our managing editor, is going to put the link in the chat box, so you can save also. If you put the coupon friendsrise or snowfriend, you'll receive 20% off the pre-orders, and you'll be one of the first people to get it when the book finally launches. Elena Neo, our social media guru, she is also going to drop our social media handles if you want to tweet or follow us for updates. She will also be putting a link to the newsletter so you could receive special updates, special deals, special offers, and so you can know about these other readings. But enough about CavanKerry Press. It's all about our authors tonight. So let me talk to you about Franny Lindsay, whose previous volumes are If Mercy, The Word Works, 2016, Our Vanishing, Red Hen Press, 2014, Mayweed, The Word Works, 2010, Lamb, Perugia, 2006, and Where She Always Was, Utah State University Press, 2004. Her work has appeared in The Atlantic, the American Poetry Review, the Yale Review, Field, Plume, Salamander, and the Best American Poetry of 2014. She was awarded the 2008 Missouri Review Prize. She has held fellowships for the National Endowment for the Arts and the Massachusetts Cultural Council. She teaches poetry workshops specializing in grief and trauma, and she is also, on top of all of that, a classical pianist. Ladies and gentlemen, Franny Lindsay. Franny's getting herself off mute. There you
Hi,
go.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see that I was muted. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you so much, Dimitri and Gabe, especially for all of your dedicated and patient hard work into bringing this book out into the world. I just admire you so much. And I just thank you everyone for being here. I want to say a few words about this book because I'm not going to talk too much during the reading. This book, the kind of backbone of it is the death of my husband in 2018. He died of cancer. It was a fairly intense battle, and I was new to being a caregiver and, of course, a wife. And I just found myself kind of stashing away and observing and taking into my heart everything that was going on and seeing it, and later sitting down and finding that there were words to it. So the first poem is sort of the book's prologue, and it is called Falcon. Falcon, your body lay alone with its readiness. We shared our bright, harsh peace with the air of the porch, the sun, a gentle stranger. The squirrel you once shooed from the feeder snatched a white crust from your sourdough. We laid our palms down in your sternum's precipice. We rested our hands and your silent white hair on your ears and your white, unfeeling fingers. We dried the tear that remained on your cheek. We opened the drapes. We opened the cupboards. There were your goblets, the rest of your whiskey, your popped birthday spoon, clean tea towels folded asleep, and your bathrobe tall on its hallway hook. On the bedside table, water stood in its cup. Your thirst had stopped. The Christmas cactus put forth a blossom. Your King James Bible perched on its chestnut stand like a falcon, wings opened wide to Isaiah. Once I watched a female peregrine swoop on a field mouse. I watched some boys swoop on a muddy red frisbee. Their clean hair glistened. In the white chapel, an amateur choir fumbled an anthem's opening notes. The peregrine came to rest on a birch tree's scarred white arm. It shook with her sudden weight. Some dry leaves fluttered with afterlife. She came for her lonesome feast, her labor of snapping the still moist bones. In the harsh and bright noon's peace, she tore and ate. Bead. I still have the shirt he wore to the doctor the day she took both his hands and looked into his milky eyes and told him as if it were some kind of blessing. None of us cried, none of that. Instead, we sat in an awkward huddle and skimmed the scan report, all 7 single-spaced pages, making no sense, especially to him who swore to God that a life was a string of beads made of single bright days, and all you needed to do to be happy was thread them, now and then hold your strand up to whatever light there was, but always keep a firm grip on the bead you were passing your red string through that very moment. Then go back to your stringing and go back again until they were gone. In the before, those mornings just after the cancer had stolen into your bones, I walked the dog early, the weak moon still out, coat over pajamas, your woolen socks under my snow boots, a half awake grip on the leash. No cars yet, nothing to prove we were there, just an ephemeral helix of paw prints and boot prints. And when we came home to bed, your sleep drifted open for us like the arched oak door to St. James Church, where you hoped, where I hoped you would be strong enough to go back on Easter. This next poem took place follows the narrative of the day before my husband died, and a group of loved ones were gathered around his bed. Golgotha. Then they came and cleansed you, my love, with a separate sponge for each arm, each hand, and its citizen fingers, each leg and each foot, pale as magnolia, and swept a burst of holy wind through your hair for ease of travel. And then they anointed one of your kerchiefs with tap water and made new your chest and belly and blurred your sex. Then they gathered their competent shadows and turned you muscled with tender indifference your boulder of pain onto a kinder place, and smoothed you and pressed upon your tongue a Eucharist of ice, and raised the blinds on the wild and sleeping day. The next few poems are about the grieving process after he died. After. No one died in your bed. It is clean today as a plot of daylight. The sheets are new, the pillows nestled like well-nourished children. The packets of swear blue swabs for your lips, the folded diapers, the delicate syringes, these were props. Someone prays as the wind grabs bone specks away from her palms. The wind has other blowing to do. Someone cries and the months don't care. Someone tends the plants and they bloom. As if informed, the mail stops. Then God appears as a story, or as the breeze where a story belongs. You died in your bed. We came, we held your face. Summer came too. We had to allow her in. In November, everything departs. Behold the sunshine draping its already weary cloak over the noontime pond. Behold the peregrine's gaze, clear of rumor. Behold the brambled railroad track at the end of wander. Behold the black dog watchfully curled around the soup bone she's worried down to its lifeless gleam. Behold the plaid shroud of her blanket. I have been willing the finches to fall silent and join the sullen wet of the leaves, willing my friends to keep out of the way, stars to keep out of the way of the night clicking along its rainy avenue. But behold too the bosomy gloom of libraries, the lamps so earnest and adequate over the little desks. I can bear to look as happiness fades from its tedious season. I can endure each vesper bell tonguing against its brave lip, thrill in words like reckon, atone, and widow, how they are one another's encrypted siblings, the things they know, the things they hearken. Morning. But then there is always the square bed of sun that the east-facing window delivers in time for the dog to lie down, basking beneath the piano in only herself. And there is the piano too, with its horse-like kind-heartedness, its sleek peace, and in the next room, which never has needed a door, the radio turned down low by the lamp and the freesia on the small dented table, speaking its terrible stories that sound at this volume like late summer insects signaling their million-year-old acceptance that this is the end of their lives, and there is always the woman who hasn't been raped in over 40 years, making her coffee, her oatmeal, making the home that no one can ever make for her. Two more. This last one comes toward the end of the book. And the whole book is dedicated to my husband's daughter, Lizzie, who stood by him and by me through some very, very challenging and difficult times with great courage and incredible grace. So this poem is dedicated to Lizzie. The Rabbits of Upland Road. You are going to lose everything. The funeral home will show up to gather your father beneath a velvet shroud. The red potatoes will sprout in their basket inside the window. Someone will wash and fold the bedding and give it away. The neighbors' visits will stop. The art will assess at barely a fraction, and then you will run out of boxes. The plants will wither. No one will want the rare books. In time, your handwriting too will tie itself into mad tangles. You will never be granted the mercy you pled for. Your hoarse voice will startle you. But look, 2 brown rabbits have popped naively out from behind the lilacs. In their lovely, identical eyes rests the gem of everyday trust. It needs no faceting. Then the evening blinks, although it is nowhere near dark, and leaves you alone with just enough thanks to tear off one more rag. And thank you again, everybody. I'm gonna end, I forgot to say all of my poetry friends, I just can't thank you enough. I'm gonna end with a newish poem that is not in the book. This poem is in memory of my sister. It's called Clydesdale. The angel who bore my sister away was a Clydesdale gelding, flanks broad in the evening peace. He stood in a meadow off Star Route 3 on the way out of Boulder, not knowing the colorless air already adrift wasn't a willow limb's sweep across his mane, but a dimming girl on his back, or that I'd stopped less to offer my apple left from lunch than to bow my head to the Lord who tends mares at their midnight birthings, the Lord who steadies the stick slender legs of newborns ambling wetly over dark pastures, the Lord who now lay August's still palm on the day's smooth back like a coarse, clean blanket. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you so much for that, Franny. Again, as we did with Tina, just going to contemplate and listen to everything that I've received and that wonderful, wonderful reading and wonderful delivery of that reading, Franny. Thank you. Because I get to swing my power as a host, I do want to start with one quick question before we turn to our Q&A audience. And audience, thank you so much for being so perceptive and staying muted. It's such a big deal for you all to be able to do that for the writers, and we appreciate it. First, I think it's something we don't address this elephant in the room a lot, especially, like in our virtual reading spaces. How do you feel about, and this is for both authors, how do you feel about the differences of navigating a virtual reading where you see everyone in little pockets versus being live? Because, I mean, as a poet myself, we have 80 participants in this room right now. And can you imagine having 80 people show up to one of our readings at the public library or in the park? So maybe if you can talk about that for a little while. I'm just interested to see where that conversation goes. So maybe Franny, we could start with you first.
Well, I was thinking about this. My whole surroundings were beautifully set up by a friend who knows how to do this stuff. This is my first ever reading on Zoom, and I'm so used to walking up and having my knees not behind a podium, and that's fine. And, finding one person in the audience to sort of glare at. And right now I'm about 6 feet away from all of you. And I'm only seeing 9 faces at a time. So I don't really know who's there because you're a little bit blurred. But I'm very grateful to those 9 faces. Yes, it is very different to be reading virtually instead of in a classroom or a library. It's kind of cool, and it's kind of, I don't know, terrifying.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, especially for some of our poets or non-poets out there in the audience. I feel like the writers or the readers' fail-safe is being able to read a room, right? And it's kind of hard to read the room and read how everyone is receiving the work while we're doing things through Zoom. And it becomes a real trusting experience in our audience, right? To just trust that they're receiving what we're saying without being able to really see them. So yeah, that's great. Thank you. Tina, thoughts?
Yeah, I find it's hard not to get the laughter. I mean, a couple of my poems are trying to be at least funny, and usually at a reading you get a couple giggles and then you feel encouraged in your mischievousness. And you also get that little sigh at the end of a poem where everybody, if it's working well, people go, ah, and that's just life's blood of a poet, to be able to hear that sigh at the end of a poem. So that's what I miss, but I adore having all these people it's like a Facebook birthday. I have all these people from all sorts of different aspects of my life showing up at once, and it's sort of how I felt when I was at my wedding, and we got married on a ferry boat, and I kind of wanted the ferry boat to just float away so everyone could meet each other from all the aspects of our lives. So I like that aspect of it, and I like the turnout. I don't get this turnout even when I'm reading with another fine poet, and it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I guess it's like what we have to leave and what we have to take, right? If we've learned anything from this experience, it's that our networks and our reaches are a lot larger when we're using technology in the appropriate ways, such as this, to bring people together. Tina, a question for you. Your prescription of vitamin awe is directly issued in your poem of that title, but you instill awe throughout your book, despite being a little morbid. How do you capture the awesome and the awe-inspiring, the wonder and beauty in these ever bleak times? Wow, that person is a poet.
Wow. Thank you for the question. I wrote these a long time ago, so it was easier then. No. I'm still writing stuff that is that has awe in it, and I think it's because I'm very curious and I read a lot, and I find a lot of awe in what I read, and I also have to be outside if the weather's nice. So I'm going outside whenever I can, and that's where I find it. And the Vitamin Awe poem talks about how you basically live longer and are healthier if you experience more awe. It reduces the inflammation in your system. It's pretty basic. So after reading that, I thought, you know, I'm going to keep having that be something that I look for as often as possible. And it also is a good counterbalance to the morbid side.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And this question kind of bounces off of that idea, or is in the realm. And this one's from Catherine Fitzpatrick. And I'm actually going to pitch it to both you, Franny, and Tina. Tina, you can go first. So Catherine Fitzpatrick is going to be the moderator for their book club next month. They've chosen the topic appreciating poetry. And their job is to convince a group of women who aren't either educated or well-read, but probably never ever even read poetry. So could you provide maybe a single compelling reason to turn to the appreciation of poetry?
Shall I take this one first?
Yeah, Franny, if you want, you can go first.
Okay. I think one reason, and you know, I get the question so often, I get the comments so often, people say, I really don't understand poetry. And what I say to them is, you know, I really don't understand it either. And the kind of poetry that I do understand is simple and direct and really from the heart and from common experience. And when you begin to see how shapeable common experience and heart really are, you see that you've got a different way to treat words. And even if you don't get that at first, it's okay. It takes a while to get, but it's a real joy. The process of getting it is a real joy.
Yeah, and I say a lot. I work with some high school students and some middle school students, and I think you have to feel it in the chest first before you could feel it in the mind, right? Or understand it in the mind. And usually, if you could describe how you feel about something, you're basically summarizing what the poem was about. Because at the end of the day, it is that innate feeling for us, right? That's what we want to elicit in our communities. So yeah, thank you, Tina.
Well, I see so much difficulty in how poetry is taught. And when I see my son working on his exercises, and basically he's asked to explain a poem. And that's the kiss of death. It's basically take a poem and bludgeon it to death. I think it's important what poetry people are introduced to. And I am a huge fan of accessible poems. I don't read much that's not accessible. I don't like being pushed away by someone else's mind. And I think that comes from journalism in some ways, that I have been trained to write so that other people can understand what I'm talking about. The poems that I love are ones that are clear but express a common emotion in a beautiful, insightful way. Franny, yours are just fabulous, and I loved hearing them. And there's so much metaphor and precise imagery, and that, I think, if you're introducing people to that kind of poem, it's a lot easier.
Tina, your poems are gorgeous too. I was just floored by them.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's great that each time one of you says something, it's the triggering to just our next question. So I feel like all of you read the questions already. So Tina, this one was for you, and it was about the bringing together journalism and poetry. But I think, Franny, this might be able to be a question fielded for you too. And instead of thinking of journalism, maybe we could even talk about your composition as a pianist. Because I'm sure like the musicality of words or the way things like that are constructed kind of goes into your work. So just substitute journalism for piano playing each time. So thank you for your stunning work, both. I would love to hear more about your work at the intersection of poetry and journalism. Do you find the two fields meld together easily for you as a writer, or do you feel like they work best separately or have different purposes while using different vocabularies or languages? Does it feel like code switching to be both a journalist and a poet? or do they speak similar codes? I think we could stop there for that intersection. It goes on a little more, but I think that's good.
I think for me, the journalism very much fed the poetry, and I think the poetry got me a couple jobs I wouldn't have gotten otherwise in journalism. There was so much material, especially as a general assignment reporter, which is what I usually was. You're going out and having adventures and seeing people who are by definition unusual. They're either in unusual circumstances or they have unusual hobbies, and they say amazing things that I would just steal heartlessly and put in poems. It was very, it primed the pump to talk to so many strangers who wanted to tell their stories. I was a feature writer predominantly, and I think, you know, I wasn't, the Times in particular was always looking for investigative reporters, but I was able to do sort of quirky turns of phrases that I think made my application more convincing to them. I miss being out on the street and talking, doing man and woman on the street interviews. I miss going on long journeys where I would go down to the Pine Barrens and talk to blueberry farmers or teenagers who had brain injuries or just any sort of unusual experience. I miss that, but I'm trying to get that still in the journalism I do work on. But it definitely, they fed each other. The language was very similar in that you need to be concise. You need to not clear your throat too much. You need to be accessible, at least for me. And they work together quite well.
Thank you, Franny.
The music in my life, I was born into a family of musicians, and my instrument is the piano, which I've played since I was a little girl. Because of my musical training and all of the musical training in my family that came before that, I hear a lot of rhyming and off-rhyming in music and a lot of rhythm in speaking. So if it's odd, but when I sit down to write, if it doesn't have a beat, there's something wrong. And I just, it feel the poetry, the poem kind of corrects itself so that the beat is there. And if I go off beat a little bit, I'll say, are you doing that on purpose or is that a goof? And so they do talk to each other a great deal. When I'm practicing, sometimes I can sort of hear words to the pieces I'm playing, some rather than others, the romantics especially. But yeah, there is a very, very clear interchange for me, and they are very, very much linked up to each other.
Yeah, the demystification of poetry, I feel like people find it to be complicated, or like Tina said, they might be reading it for the wrong reasons, like a school assignment, or they're not reading the right poems, but there's so much musicality in just the way we speak, just regionally even. I'm pretty sure if we got everyone on the Zoom call from all across the country and we just told them to speak a sentence, there would be a beauty in each way a person was saying that one sentence, because there's that musicality that you're talking about, Franny. Yeah, I want to remind everyone, Tina, I know that you have to go. In the chat box, if anyone wanted to order Tina's book for pre-order, Rise Wildly, if you loved her voice, you love those poems, you can order it with a 20% coupon code. When you're ordering it on the link in the chat box, if you type in the coupon code, either, oh God, sorry, it's 8 o'clock. I turn off at 7:30. Friendsrise or snowfriend, you can get your 20% off coupon for that book. We still have more questions, but I know, Tina, you said you did have to run, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if everyone can just give a round of applause for Tina, we'll stick around for Franny for a little bit just so we could answer some more questions. But Tina, it's
Thank you.
always a
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Such an honor. Nice to meet everyone.
Wonderful to meet you.
Stay safe.
Thank you,
You
Tina.
too.
We'll be in
Bye.
contact. Be well. Okay, so coming back with Franny, your poems survive the absolute devastation of unfathomable loss and carry us through with grace. Can you speak on the power of poems as catharsis or as a resource for personal healing?
You know, I don't think of these poems as cathartic. I think of them as, I hope, if I have succeeded in a poem I'm writing, then I have in front of me, I hope, I've got a piece of art. I don't have something that I needed to get off my chest. If I needed to get something off my chest, then I'm gonna tuck it away somewhere and not show it to anybody. So I try to be very unsentimental in talking about very sad things. I just try and look at them and examine them and lay them out on the table and look at their parts and see how they move and see how the light hits them. That may sound a little cold-hearted, but I feel it's really kind of the way for me to really understand.
Mm-hmm. So, Franny, when how long did it take you once you started this project? So, actually, I think this is a question about the formation of the book. Now, did you go into this book knowing about those thematic elements that you were going to tackle, or was this something this was something that you were writing, and it kind of just came together?
No, I actually hadn't written for quite some time when I started writing the poems that formed the arc of this book. I kind of didn't think I could write anymore. And then one night during a difficult time in caregiving, I just sat down at the kitchen table and started writing and writing and writing and writing. And I looked and I said, you know, you really can't let anyone see this. And so I worked on a little bit, and I sort of thought, well, you still can't let anyone see this. And I worked on it a little more, and I said, you know, you really have to let this into the light of day. So I did.
Wow.
And then the rest of the poems just kind of followed.
And I guess that was kind of like the hypertrophied version of that break you needed in that space, right? How you could objectively look at something.
Say that again?
No, I said I felt like that this was probably like a hypertrophied version of you having to just sit and wait to think of something objectively. It's amazing how our body receives time and tells us the time we need in order to get to work. I think this is essential when, as artists, we were thinking about writing in times of COVID and BLM, for instance, right? There was friends and colleagues that pen to paper, it happened immediately, expeditiously, it just happened. And others needed to just sit and contemplate and just be in those moments. And I think that's so important for artists too, as just thinking about the self-health aspect, you know, the self-care aspect of it, and knowing when we can and when we can't create. So that's a really real thing, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can create anytime you want to. I remember after 9/11, this great avalanche of poems that came crashing down on us. And some of them were just beautiful. And some of them, of course, were just, you know, never mind. But people were really writing about that. And I think it's been the same with other disasters and catastrophes and heartbreaks. I think George Floyd was one such time. And I think even the bad poems need to be in the world. I think even the poems that are there just for the writer need to be there in the world. They have a place. I think the great poems, or what other people consider great, whether it's just 10 people or 5,000 people, those have a very different purpose, or the same purpose. It's really, I think it's really up to the reader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we'd actually be surprised what we might think won't be received well by an audience, and then it's received widely, right? Like another attendee wrote that your reading was breathtaking, and they loved how your work infused rituals with the everyday, like coffee cups and tidying up, with the bewildering experiences of loss that reminded that was very Dickinsonian. Um, the audience member would love to hear which poets or other writers helped shape your own voice, and what you borrow or draw from them, and specifically from those poets.
You know, years ago, I think I was in graduate school, I came across Jean Valentine's very first book. She had won the Yale Younger Poet Series, and I still have it. And it's a first edition. And I went home to my little room in the little drafty rooming house where I lived, and I just sat on the floor with that book and I poured over it. And I love her voice. I also love the directness and the simplicity of William Stafford's voice. And for another reason altogether, I love W.S. Merwin's voice.
Yeah, Merwin. And it's amazing how these different poets communicate with us while we're writing, right? We might not even be receiving their voice, but we might just be receiving something that they're saying, or in the timbre of which they're saying it. Like Gabe mentioned that, that Gabriel is still deep in sitting with the side of things in regards to 2020. And although some of your poems, they didn't feel cathartic for you, there was a bunch of people commenting in the chat box how much they felt the catharsis from your work. And I think that's just something intuitively that as writers have to know, that we like looking at a screen of 9 people instead of 80, we have to trust that they're going to receive it, right?
You know, when I teach my workshop on grief and trauma, one of the first things I tell my students, if any of them are here, they will be proud. I hope they're not rolling their eyes at the ceiling. But anyway, I tell them that pretend there's a box of tissues in the room. That box of tissues is not for the poet. That box of tissues is to pass around the audience. If the poet has to grab the box of tissues, then the poet hasn't really done enough work.
Wow.
So the crying kind of has to be out of the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm sorry. I'm writing down the box of tissues analogy because it's so good. The box of tissues is not for the writer. It's for those who are going to be listening to the writer. Oh my goodness. And I think that even heightens the social responsibility for us, right? And that's something that actually sounds a little scary, that we're kind of responsible for the emotions of the mental well-being of those around us. So how do you navigate that with something that's so personal, with not being like with what Tina Kelley says, like so morbid about something? Like how do you walk away from a poem advancing someone's psyche instead of doing something that isn't as progressive as it should be?
Well, you know, it's sort of like when I've been to a really, really upsetting movie and I get to a scene and I just go, oh my God, I saw it and now I can't unsee it ever. And I'm kind of mad about that. It just doesn't seem fair. So I've written some poems. I've written some poems about some very, very difficult things. And what I hope I'm doing, and I really am not the best judge, what I hope I'm doing is sort of skating along a very thin line of, this is just difficult enough to bear, but it's not so difficult that the reader, the audience, is in over their heads. I don't want any of my readers to just think, oh my God, now I'm going to just be a mess for the rest of my life. I want to be respectful. So that's sort of my responsibility as a writer.
Wow. Thank you, Franny. Franny, if we were in person, I'm pretty sure this would have turned into dinner. Because I could sit here and I could just ask you questions all night.
I could talk all night.
I think we would be able to do that. Yeah. I'll come back for maybe about another minute or so. I'm going to see if anyone has any other burning questions. If not, if you want to have a sound off, say something to Franny, say something about the reading, you can put it down in the chat box. If you have any other questions, you can please reach out to me at Dimitri, that's Dimitri at CavanKerryPress.org. If your website, if the website isn't working for ordering the book, you can reach out to Gabe at Gabriel at CavanKerryPress.org. Gabe, thank you for putting that down as well. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. Let's just get a round of applause. This was just so amazing. I appreciated all of you being such a great audience and staying here past due. Franny, is there any last words of send-off you want to do for the lovely folks at home?
Say that again?
Is there a last send-off you would like to give our lovely folks before they pack it on home?
I'm humbled by how many people came to this. And as I said when I first came on, I can only see 9 faces. I don't know how many more people are here, but I just feel like this has been a wonderful, beautiful experience. And thank you for listening. Thank you for loving poetry and supporting it. And stay safe and stay well.
Likewise, everyone, please stay safe, stay well, keep the positive vibrations going, keep the poetry going, and we will see you all. Like I said, make sure that you're on your newsletter because we have other readings like this, and we have brilliant poets just like this all the time. Franny's going to be with us again with another poet at some point in October, and Tina Kelley will be with us again in November. So everyone be well, stay safe, and have a happy evening.